Okay, hi everyone. I am here with the author of Catch the Wind, Bruce Lowery, to celebrate the launch of his book today with Hembury Books. Congratulations, Bruce. How are you feeling?
Uh, yeah, terrific. Really, the whole process of writing the book and the lead up to today has been really enlightening, but a real joy to be involved with. Yeah, I'm feeling on top of the world, and this story has been rattling around in my head for over 50 years. It had to get out, and it's nice to actually have it in print now. So it's a big day
Yeah,
for me in so many respects after such a long period of time.
and it's a lot of hard work writing a book. You've put in all the hard work, so it must be satisfying to now that the book exists and other people can enjoy your story.
Well, let's hope they do. It was. I guess it's not such hard work when you're doing something that you're really enjoying, and every step of the way was a real joy. It's not everybody that gets a chance to relive their youth over and over again. So no, it's been good fun.
Can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, I guess everything has a start to it, and there was a real catalyst to the start of my book. And I won't want to go into it in a lot of detail, but briefly, in the winter of 1968, there was a series of unexpected events that occurred, and the net result of that was that I had an enforced separation from my then girlfriend, who had been going out together for some 18 months, quite an intense affair. So it was really quite devastating. And from getting the news and walking some 9 kilometres home, upon arriving home that winter's evening, I made a decision, and within half an hour, the decision was that I was going to hitchhike to Perth. I put a couple of changes of clothes in a bag and a toothbrush. Rung my good mate Gil Halliday, who came and picked me up in the main street of Sassafras, took me to some student accommodation at Parkville in a suburb of Melbourne, where I had
Yeah.
another mate, Peter Lawrence, who was living there. And he, within 30 seconds of seeing me, he wanted to know what I was doing. And when I explained to him, and on the off chance, I said, "Well, would you like to come with me?" And within 30 seconds, he said yes. So that's how the whole thing started. And probably rash, probably a knee-jerk reaction, but still, it happened that way, and the adventure began from there.
And I like the bit about how you get the plan, you decide to execute it, and then you have the sober realization that you have about $5 between you. So you
A
hitchhike.
little, a little more than that, but no more than $50 between us. Yeah, yeah.
So that leads you to hitchhiking across the country.
Yes, yes. That was the only way we were going to get started. We had no money for transport other than sticking our thumb out. And of course, it was quite legal then. I believe it's illegal now, but it was a fairly common practice. So we took off early and on the very next morning. And it was a great start to the trip, because we got not that far out of Melbourne, in a place called Deer Park, where a group of blokes who'd been to the footy that afternoon stopped and picked Pete and I up and took us all the way to Ararat, which was a great start to the trip. It was some hundreds of kilometres away, so that was great. And they put us up for the night as well, which was a rare event. You didn't expect to pick up a hitchhiker and have them stay in your house overnight, but they did. They're wonderful people. So we were off to a pretty good start. It got a little tougher after that, but it was a pretty good start on day one.
Yeah, but a pretty amazing adventure. So you were 18 in 1968, which was
That's
an
correct.
incredible era for music. What was it like being a music tragic?
Well, I guess a lot of people in that era were what we would call music tragics. Music had undergone a real transformation. The so-called British invasion of America and the rest of the world had taken place a couple of years before that. And so music was just vital to all of us. And we all wanted to be in a rock band, and we all talked about being in a rock band, but very few of us did, of course. But it was a fanciful idea, and we were all hooked on music. And in fact, we went to such remote parts of Australia that frequently we couldn't hear any music. And I realised during the long stays in some unusual remote places how badly I missed music.
Mm.
it was a terrific era for music. Everything was being transformed,
Totally.
and music was one of them.
And you saw Johnny O'Keefe while you were traveling, didn't you?
Yes, yes. At the time, that was in Perth. We went to a nightclub called the Cat's Whisker and saw the great man himself. He was probably at the end of his pop career. He hadn't had a hit record for probably 3 years, which was ancient history for us. But he was quite a legend. The Elvis Presley of Australian rock was JRK, and we went to, and he was absolutely electrifying. He had a lot of hits banked up over the late 50s and early 60s, and it was a wonderful, wonderful night seeing him. And I saw him again some years later when I returned to Melbourne, and the link with Johnny O'Keefe continued because my daughter was in a theatre production of his show Shout. And she played his second wife, so there was a connection for many years with the great JOK.
Wow.
But he was wonderful that night, and that was a great experience. Yes.
Your book is so evocative of the time. You know, with your bell-bottom trousers, but your hair, your blonde ponytail rubbed some people the wrong way, but you were determined that you were going to keep it. And it was quite a political act in a way, wasn't it? Can you tell us about what it was like to be 18 with a blonde ponytail in some remote places in Australia?
Well, particularly in the remote areas, it was considered very strange behaviour. But in the capital cities, it was becoming a little more commonplace. But before that, it was a very conservative era, the late 50s and early 60s. And most blokes were still wandering around with very short back and sides haircuts. And so, but I jumped on the bandwagon of what the pop guys were doing. And so therefore I grew my hair, and there was no one going to stop me from having long hair. It was just the way I wanted it to be, and I guess I was a bit of a rebel in that regard. Yeah.
And people would call you city boys and things like that. I'd say, you can't have a job, you've got a ponytail.
Yeah. They said a lot of worse things than that.
Yeah, but you have a real larrikin spirit. You're, uniquely yourself, which really, the period of history that it's now located in is fascinating. But the fact that, you and your mates, you just go and have this big adventure, sort of, it doesn't, you get into some pretty remote places and you just have a really kind of can-do attitude. Like, do you want to tell us about what it was like to be a fettler, which I had never heard the word fettler until I read your book. First of all, what is it?
Well, a fettler is basically a labourer, but a labourer whose job it is to maintain railway lines. So Pete and I had got as far as Port Augusta, just the other side of Adelaide. And as you suggested earlier in this conversation, we were running very low on money. So one of the lifts that we got coming into Port Augusta, the guy was kind enough to suggest that maybe we could get a job with the Commonwealth Railways. So Pete and I levelled up there with cap in hand, thinking, well, maybe we will get a job. And if we don't have any money. What's going to happen? Well, they couldn't get us on a train fast enough. I always found it difficult to find fettlers, experienced or otherwise. So yeah, we were taken from Port Augusta, 800 kilometres right into the middle of the Nullarbor, to a little railway siding, a six-man camp called O'Malley. I think it's a wreck now. I don't think it's used anymore, but in the day it was a six-man camp, as I say. 3 sheds, little more than sheds, a water tank, 3 dunnies out the back, no electricity, no running water. It was pretty rudimentary, to say the least, but a very interesting place. We learnt from somebody on the train on the way to O'Malley that particular area, I should say, in the Nullarbor, was also used by the military, the Australian military, during the Second World War, where they didn't have enough fettlers. So they took out a group of about 300 or 400 Italian prisoners of war So they had been out there only a decade before us, and so there were lots of jokes between us about finding Italian ghosts and things like that throughout our stay at O'Malley. But another thing that came as an astonishing find for me when I was researching this book, so it was some 50 years later, I learned that O'Malley, being stuck straight in the middle, smack in the middle of the Nullarbor, was also not far from the site of Maralinga. Maralinga will probably ring a bell with some people. It was the site where the British military detonated the nuclear bombs in Australia. There were several detonated there. So without doubt, this was only about 5 or 6 years before we were there. So there was, without doubt, an awful lot of radiation still lying about, but we had no idea, of course. And it doesn't seem to have had any effect all these years later. But so it was a very interesting place, and it was still 900 kilometres before you got to the other side of the railway line that goes across the Nullarbor and to Kalgoorlie. So we were smack in the middle, remote, and that was it.
Oh, it's just amazing. And then you worked as a jackaroo, which was also hard yakka. Not a lot of money, some strange workmates. What did you learn about yourself in these tougher times?
Well, precisely that. I learnt that if you were going to survive in a place like that, you had to toughen up. There were no beg your pardons, although there were very strict rules. An example of that was the people who ran the sheep station, called Yoringa. It was up on Shark Bay, which is between Carnarvon and north of Carnarvon and south of let me rephrase that. It was south of Carnarvon and north of Geraldton, so pretty remote, about 800 kilometres north of Perth. So we were there. And the one that I was talking about, the rules and regulations of this remote place, was that I remember one occasion where my friend that had travelled with me, Pete, was still back in Perth. Another guy who came with me by the name of Bob, a very humorous guy. But we both turned up. It was a very hot evening, and we turned up for dinner. We had a separate dining area. The family dined in another room. But the lady of the house brought our meals in, saw us without a shirt on, sitting there naked from the waist up, and she refused to serve us meals until we went and put a shirt on. And the only shirt that Bob and I had was sheep blood encrusted, but it was okay to wear because we had to have clothing on when we were eating our dinners, with nobody else present, just Bob and I.
It's amazing. I mean, social mores have changed so much. I mean, there were some sort of lodgings where you had to be home by a certain time, or you would just be locked out for the rest of the night. I've experienced that in India, but it was a different time when you traveled. And you also had a letter from your father, didn't you, giving you permission to travel? Can you tell us about that?
Yes, this will come as a surprise to younger people, but in 1968 and before that, you weren't really considered an adult until you became 21. So my father was still fairly formal with such things, so he thought that I'd left, and all I'd done is left a brief note for my parents when I left abruptly. So he thought that I was travelling without his permission, and therefore people may not give me a job. So he actually sent me a letter of approval saying that he condoned my actions and that I was seeking to improve myself on travels around Australia. I never ever got to use it, incidentally, but it was nice for him to have sent it to me, and I was very, very grateful. Yeah, and I might add that letter writing was the way to communicate then.
That's what I was just about to ask you. And you still got some of these letters, and they were a real highlight of your week in these remote places, weren't they?
Yeah, well, we've got to remember that 1968, there were no computers, no internet. And so even making a telephone call was horrendously expensive over distances. So the way to communicate, and pretty much the only way, particularly in the remote areas, was by letter. So a 5-cent stamp, a whole 5 cents, would send your letter anywhere around Australia. And I kept pretty much every one of those letters over those 50 years. Lots of letters from my mother and my father.
Yeah.
Lots from mates back home. We kept all of them, and they get a fair airing in the book. There's little excerpts, which in a way tell a little bit of a side story about what was happening at home with my family and my friends back there at the same time as I was travelling through those remote parts of Australia.
And the anguish of writing letters to your girlfriend, well, then girlfriend Trish, and the parents intercepting the letters and the frustration of that. Parents had a lot of control back then, didn't they?
Yeah, they certainly did. We found ways around that on occasion. I'd send a letter to one of her girlfriends who would then surreptitiously pass it on, but frequently they kept being blocked. So it was a very frustrating time because I still wanted to stay in contact with her, but still enjoy my travelling adventure. So it was a mixed feeling as I was travelling around, constantly worrying about her, and but also enjoying what I was doing, because it was a real blast. The travels and the people we met and the places we went to were just extraordinary.
Totally amazing. Much better than staying home moping in Melbourne.
Yes, that was never on the cards.
Good on you.
Always, I had to do something, and that seemed like a good idea. And thank goodness I did, because I've got some terrific memories, and now I'm sharing them with everybody here.
Yeah. When did you get the idea that you were going to turn the memories into a book?
Well, it was always on as I said at the start of this interview, I was always rattling around in my head that I needed to record this again. I kept diaries throughout the travelling time, and as I say, I kept the letters. And so having those to fall back on. But the other thing that has always been evident to me, and it's still true today, whenever I travel, and I'm sure this is true with many other people, I have a real heightened sense of awareness.
Yeah.
So a lot of the memories of those years, although it was so long ago, it still sticks in my mind, and I remember some things very, very vividly. So having those memories plus the books, the diaries, it was enabled me to get a good chronological order of everything that happened all those years ago.
What would you say to, I'm sure there's many people listening who have long hoped to write a book, but they haven't got started because they doubt their own memory. They think, oh, it happened so long ago, I couldn't possibly remember. What would your advice be?
It's amazing how things flood back to you once you sit down and concentrate. And reliving all that was wonderful. And my advice to them would be, give it a shot. There's nothing to lose if you've got some time to do it. I again repeat that I just found the whole process so enjoyable. I really enjoyed doing it. So why wouldn't you have a go at it? Whether you have your book published or not, just the fact that you've done it and written those words down. It was such a really wonderful exercise for me. Quite cathartic at times, but I would encourage anybody to do that if they feel inclined, and give it a go. What do you got to lose?
Yeah. And when we first got in touch about publishing your book, and when you sent it to me, your recollections were so vast. I said, Bruce, you've written 2 books. This is like 150,000 words.
Yes.
So this is a 2-part series. Do you want to tell people about that?
Yes. Jess is quite right. I'd written an awful lot of words, so vivid were my memories that it was going to be too big a book. So we've split it pretty much down the middle. After travelling to West Australia, I returned to Melbourne on the thought that I might elope with my estranged girlfriend. That was premature because the 12 months weren't up. And without stealing too much of my thunder in the second book, I ended up taking off again. And the second book covers my time in the shearing sheds in Queensland, which was also a terrific experience. And most of it's pretty well written. To change a few things. And we're planning just to probably publish that in 2025. So So there is a follow-up, and they link very nicely together. But the first book is complete in its own right. So.
Okay. How long did it take to write the book, and what kind of a writing routine did you set up?
I let it just roll, and because it was a pleasure, just getting up, having a shower, having breakfast, sitting down at the table, and got the laptop out and started writing. One of the things I found very useful, and this wouldn't have been possible in years gone by, is where I wasn't sure of facts of places and buildings, I was able to quickly Google immense amount of facts. So that made sure that largely most of the things I've written about are accurate for the time and how they are today too. So you can do an amazing amount of research in this day and age, and that helped the process greatly.
Was it in the beginning, was it sort of daunting from a creative point of view, or did you not put expectations on yourself? Because again, this is a really big stumbling block for a lot of people that prevents them continuing with writing their first book. How did you do the mindset kind of as an author?
That's a very interesting question, because lots of people had advised me to go and do a creative writing course, a number of suggestions, and probably all of them would have been valid. But I had this book in my mind, and I had an understanding of how I wanted to tell it. And I wanted the story to be humorous and full of humour. And indeed, that was the sign of the times. People will surely get a few chuckles out of this book, because in those remote parts of Australia, keeping a sense of humour was absolutely paramount.
And you do, Bruce. Yeah.
So it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. And so I didn't find that process of getting up and just working through it, and 3 or 4 or 5 hours would go by, and I was really happily engrossed in it. I have to say that my wife, Sue, was remarkably patient through that period, but no, they let me get on with it, and they gave me the free space and time to do it, and I enjoyed it. It was good.
And the book is dedicated to Sue, so that's very nice.
Yes. We've been married for well over 50 years now. She's certainly the love of my life, and yeah, so it was appropriate that book be dedicated to her. Yes.
That's beautiful. Did you have any other tools and resources to jog your memory apart from Google? What about, did you listen to music and stuff to kind of jog your memory of the things that you were into back then?
Yes. I mean, the love of music was clear in those first drafts. Every chapter I started with some lines out of a rock song from 68, 67. But of course, after we investigated the copyright complications, we had to take all those out. But throughout the writing of the book, one of the things I used to research was to go back on. There was a pop magazine back in the day called Go Set. So you can Google the charts from Go Set right back to 1968 and before that. So I was able to refresh my mind about which songs were current during those specific months. And of course, the only time I could, in the remote parts of Australia, at Yoringa up in the northwest coast and in the middle of the Nullarbor, the only time you would get some music was when somebody else had a transistor. I didn't have one, so I'd borrow them whenever I could. But it would fade in and out to the degree where you'd hear maybe 2 words or 2 lines of the song, and then it'd fade out for another 30 seconds and then again. But that was still pure joy to have that music with you, even in those remote parts of Australia.
And in one scene, you hear a Beatles track for the first time. Was it "Hey Jude"?
No, it was actually with a little help from my friends, but the Joe Cocker version. It was the first time I heard it, and I was absolutely knocked out with this music fading in and out while I'm lying in bed in this Yoringa homestead and listening to Joe Cocker wailing in and out, and I was just knocked out. So much so that I made a note in the diary, and it's in the book. So that was
Yeah.
fun. Yes.
Tell us who your favorite artists were of that period. The Beatles
Well, the
were.
list goes on, but certainly, obviously, everybody
How
was
much
into the
time do we
Beatles
have?
and the Stones.
The
Um,
Stones. Yeah.
the Beatles were in the bit, and they'd led the way, I guess, in many respects. But there were some terrific groups. By and large, it was the groups out of England, but the groups in Australia that were making a real name for themselves, and the industry was growing here too, with groups like the Easy Beats were one notable group, Billy Thorpe and the Aztecs. So there was a lot of good Australian groups around at the time, and so we were hooked into those guys as well. Yes.
Yeah, wow. What do you think of contemporary music out of interest? Do you rule
Oh,
it? Do you
yeah. I
appreciate it?
no, I can't quite get hold of rap, but I listen to a lot of new artists. I still buy music. I'm still a bit old fashioned. I still buy CDs, but a bit of downloading as well. And so, but no, I have a deep and abiding love of music that came from that era, and it still goes on today. So yeah, I'm very interested in contemporary artists as well.
You must
Yeah.
have a massive CD collection. Massive.
My wife is nodding in the background. Yeah.
Like
She often wants me to
I'm
do
thinking it's a wall or something. Walls.
yes, and cupboards, and
Yes.
I'm frequently requested to cull both CDs, records, and books, and I do so reluctantly. Most of them are still here, hidden away in various parts of the
Well, they're going to make an appearance at your book launch because that's going to be a music fest, isn't it? In Alinda at your
Yes,
book
yes,
launch.
yes.
Yeah.
And in fact, it's worth stating that the name of the book is named after a song from Donovan way back in the mid '60s, and it was a very special song to me. "Catch the Wind." For those that know it, will know what I'm talking about. It was one of those songs that if you're out somewhere on your own, you'd often be humming that in the background, particularly if you were feeling nostalgic, which was often the case. And yeah, wonderful piece of music. And so that's what the book is named after. So there it is.
There it is, from the Nullarbor to the far northwest in '68. Catch the
Yeah.
Wind. And what does Catch the Wind mean to you? Why did you love that as the title?
Well, I guess after the breakup with my girlfriend at the time, there were a lot of things surrounding the separation with her that were going to be elusive to me. And also many of the things that I encountered, it was pretty hard to get your head around some of those things at times. They were pretty confronting. Example of that was on the Nullarbor and working on that railway line. The ganger, who was the boss of the 6-man camp, was most certainly a chronic alcoholic. But there was a fair chance he was certifiably insane as well. So he led us a merry dance out there. Gave us a few chuckles, but some pretty hairy
Scary.
moments.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So as tricky as it is to catch the wind, was some of the situations you found yourself in?
Yes.
Yes, I see. Now, your heart was broken, but you did still date a few nice ladies along the way. I loved those scenes because the courtship of the 60s is just like, it reminds me of what my mum and dad told me about their lives. So can you tell us, one of my favorites is when you go on the date with 3 ladies. Can you tell us about that?
I don't want to spoil the book too much. It was actually 4 ladies who.
4 ladies. But what was the kind of? Just tell us about what happened there.
We met at a pub, and after plying them with numerous Pims and lemonade, which was a drink of the era, they thought that. I thought they'd taken a shine to me because at the end of the conversation, they said, "Well, we've got to go now, but would you like to come out with us tomorrow night?" And I said, "Well, all of you?" And they said, "Yes, we're going to the drive-in. Would you like to come with us to the drive-in?" And I, of course, said, "Yes, absolutely." So I had a memorable night with 4 ladies at a drive-in theatre watching horror movies. One of which was about Dracula, and the other one was about zombies or something. So yeah, I was able to research those movies again for the book. So it was a bit about the movies in there as well, but
Sounds
mostly
fun.
about the antics of myself and these girls in a fairly cramped car in Perth in a drive-in theatre. Yeah, good fun.
And courtship was, would you say, a bit more formal with sort of dates, and you would know the place that you were going to? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, all that was starting to break down considerably, and I put it down to the era because not that many years before the birth contraception pill had been introduced to Australia and the rest of the world. So there was a certain loosening up of people's thoughts about the possibility of having extra affairs, and so it wasn't as formal as it had been, but
In the
there was
50s,
it was a little bit more freewheeling than it had been, and that continued to be the case. So
yeah.
so it presented new opportunities, shall we say?
It was a time of real change. Yes.
Very much so. That's what made the late '60s so very important and identifiable as being quite unique.
Yeah. Yeah, totally amazing. Have you been back to any of the places that you talk about in your book?
It's very difficult to get to O'Malley unless you can actually drive over land. You couldn't back in those days, but I haven't been able to do that. It's so remote, as I say, 800 kilometres from Port Augusta and 900 from Kalgoorlie. So it's difficult to get. So I haven't been there. But the interesting thing is that I do know that Yoringa sheep station still exists. It's still running. It was 325,000 acres and still is.
Wow.
But it carried only 10,000 sheep. So that was one sheep to every 30 acres. So it was a pretty remote area. But that's still there today. And it was so remote that you could walk down to the main road, which was some kilometres away on the coast, and you could stand there for hours on end and never see a vehicle. Well, I know for a fact that that's not the case now. There are vehicles up and down that highway going up to Broome frequently, so much so that the Yoringa station owners have built a campground there now. So the campground at Yoringa, which of course didn't exist in '68, is now quite flash with hot and cold running water and even a pizza oven, I'm led to believe. And Telstra reception is excellent, I'm led to believe. So I haven't been back to that place either. I have been back to Perth on numerous occasions, but mainly on business. So that's something that I do need to do. Now I have a bit more spare time. I'm in retirement from regular work, but not from writing books. So I'll find some time. I do need to go back to those places. Yes.
You might need to take some copies.
Yes, sell them to the fettlers that are out there.
So would just flip out if they chanced upon a book that describes the incredibly remote place where they are?
Yeah, I think that the technology has marched on. I don't think there are many fettlers these days. I think they do it for fast-moving trains that move up and down the line, and they drop fettlers off for hours at a time instead of leaving them posted out there in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Because what was it? You would wait for the milk and coffee train.
The tea and sugar. The tea and sugar train. Yes.
Tell us about the train.
Obviously, there were no shops out in the middle of the Nullarbor. So once a week, the tea and sugar train would arrive, would stop for no more than 10 minutes. And you'd expect that everything would be in one carriage. But no, there was a butcher's carriage, there was a grocer's carriage, and a pharmaceuticals carriage. So you'd have to run up and down the railway line in the 10 minutes allotted with a wheelbarrow doing your shopping. And to get alcohol, you had to go and bribe the guard at the back of the train, and he would bring out whatever you ordered the next week, as long as you greased his palms. So we'd frequently order a case of beer to bring out to us the next week. So it was keen anticipation that we'd wait for the tea and sugar to arrive, not just for food, but for liquor as well.
And there was some homebrew there, wasn't there?
Yes. The alcoholic ganger brewed his own beer. He called it Bock beer. and it was amazingly good, but he didn't share it around too often. So we would, if we got desperate, we'd offer him money to buy some from him. But yeah, so yeah, we would enjoy a drink after working pretty hard out there, but it was usually all gone in a matter of a day or two, and then we'd wait for the tea and sugar again.
Wake up a bit dusty, wouldn't you? There's a few dusty mornings in your book, Bruce.
Yeah. there were. It's amazing what you do to entertain yourself in remote areas. We had a lot of fun, and it's all recorded in the book. So and some of it, I guess, will give people a rise to have a bit of a chuckle about things. And
mateship is a really strong part of your book, and as you say at the beginning, that in Australian culture, we do have a really strong sense of mateship. It's as important now as it was before. But you had some amazingly close friendships and memories made with people. Are you still in touch with some of the people in your book?
Yeah, most of them. Sadly, I lost track of several. The guy that I was referring to that I went to Yaringa with, a guy called Big Bob. He was a real character, a terrific sense of humour. But I was certainly aware from events that are revealed in the book that he was on the run a bit. There was the boys in blue were after him, so that was his reason for going to somewhere as remote as that. So he made himself scarce, and I've never been able to trace him. But Peter Lawrence, who I travelled with for many of those months. He lives now in Canberra, but we're in regular contact. And many of the other mates that are referred to and appear in the book, both book 1 and book 2, I'm in regular contact with, I'm pleased to say, and either to have a coffee or a beer, or if they're in interstate telephone, text, as those friendships and bonds that you create in those circumstances live with you forever.
And the memories do as well. That's, I think, when there's such a strong emotional component to a memory, you just sort of can't forget it. You can forget the colour shirt that someone was wearing, but you can't forget the way that you felt in that moment, and that comes through really strongly in your book, I think.
Yeah, I guess Australians place a great deal of store in mateship. It came from those 2 world wars and Korea, and of course Korea, which was raging at the time that this book was written, and mateship came from those military areas, but they filtered through to everyday life, and having good, strong mates that had your back was important, and we guarded that very, very closely, and those friendships have stayed with us for life, and I'm sure there's strong friendships all over the world, but that mateship thing in Australia is important, and certainly when you're travelling and you're in some pretty hairy moments, and you've got a mate beside you, that counts an awful lot. Yeah,
it's everything. And it can be survival, whether that is possible or not, is the strength of your friendships and what you'll do for each other. Yeah.
And particularly if you share a similar sense of humour too. So, and that we certainly did.
A lot of good fun. Does it feel good to be an author? Does that feel part of your identity now, or will that still take a little bit more time?
I think it'll take a little bit more time, but yeah, I'm starting to warm to the thought of being referred to as an author. Yeah, I've been a number of things in my life, Fettler and Jackaroo and a businessman, but now I'm an author, so it's a nice.
And a grandpa?
It's keeping me busy, and I'm really enjoying every moment of it. So it's good, and we'll see where it all leads from here. This is probably the last career I'll have.
Well, may it be a happy and long one. There may be book 3, book 4.
Well, let's see how we go. If it continues to be fun and people are interested in reading it, I'll give it a go.
Terrific. Well, why don't you tell people the details about your in-person launch at Olinda Reserve?
Yes, the Sunday after Easter, and it's the 7th, middle of the afternoon, 3 o'clock. We're going to have a little gathering of some friends, and so I'm not sure how many people will be able to make it, but we're going to have a few drinks, A mate of mine, good mate of mine, Rick Wall, will be who's an ex-journo, and he'll be interviewing me in much the same way that you have kindly this morning, Jess. So we'll have a bit of fun.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Talk a little bit about the book, and there'll be books available at that launch. So I'll be able to sign them if people would want me to do that. So yes, that's an important event because it's the local launch. I've been a Hills boy ever since I was a young kid, and so to share that with all my friends in the Hills is going to be something special.
And your book opens in that very location where you're launching, which is beautiful.
Yes, I'm a life member of the Olinda Ferny Creek Football Netball Club, and so it's nice to be able to have my book launch in that location with many of my friends from the club and outside the club. So yeah, it's going to be very special. And of course, I would hope to be able to have some ongoing book launches at bookshops. So making sure that other people as well.
And there'll be the details will be up on your website, brucelowery.com.
Yes. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And you've got
Sorry, I was about to say I should mention that it was always a good idea to have a website once I started this process. And my granddaughter Jess and her boyfriend Ethan put a wonderful website together. So Jess just mentioned it, www.brucelowery.com. If you haven't had a look at it so far, have a bit of a look. They did a fantastic job in putting it together. So and all that information about book launches and book number 2, that'll all appear on that website as we go forward. Yeah.
And you've got a bit of star power behind your book, haven't you? With John Wood.
John Wood, who I've known for a number of years, but he's a wonderful actor and a good friend. He read the book in a week flat, and he's going to be putting a little few words together about the book. So we'll be putting that out there too. It's nice to have people that care enough to do that sort of thing. Another guy called Jeff Roycroft, who helped me with a lot of the editing process. He's put a few words together too. So we'll pop those on the website so people can have a look at what the early reviews are saying.
Wonderful. And as we speak, I think as it's nearing midnight in the United States, the paperback is officially available on Amazon. So that's really exciting. If people can get it from any global retailer wherever you are in the world. If it's not in stock, you can just place the order and they'll be able to get it for you. The ebook and the paperback. And Amazon as well will be, because the launch day is actually today, and when it hits midnight, that's when the paperback becomes shipped.
Yeah, that's and the distribution of books these days has been a real education to me, and to think that anybody almost anywhere in the world can go to almost any bookshop and place an order for the book is a bit mind-bending, but it's great, and it gives wonderful distribution. For those that are interested in a bloke reminiscing about his time all those years ago in outback Australia.
That we're all very fond of, whether you saw it or not. It's a magical part of Australian history. And I am going to continue to urge you to record an audiobook. So if anyone out there is an audiobook fan, please tell Bruce that he should sit down and read his book and record it so that you can listen to it in your car or while you're gardening or anywhere you like. Right, Bruce?
Yes, it's put quite a bit of pressure on me in that regard. So I'll have to do something about it. The family are putting pressure on too. So yes, I'm sure we'll have to do something like that. Yeah.
To hear you read your book in your own voice, it's like the same as why you go to a book launch to hear the reading. It's such an enjoyable experience. There's a lot of audiobook fans. It's a massively growing category.
Yeah, I listen to some audiobooks myself, so and podcasts and things like that. So I can see the merit of it. It's worth having a go at. Yep. So there's more to do.
Five people to come and make the request, and then we might be able to persuade you. Yes, but thanks so much, Bruce. It's been absolutely fantastic and fun to work with you on publishing Catch the Wind, and so many good things are going to happen from today onwards now that your book is out in the world.
Well, thank you, Jess, and thank you. Working with Hembury Books has been a real delight. there's a lot of tricks to the trade, and Jess knew pretty much all of them, and she's guided me very, very ably through it and tidied up parts of the book that needed a little bit of tightening up. And so I'm being very grateful to Jess for the kind assistance she's given me. So I sing the praises of Hembury Books pretty highly. So anybody else that's thinking of publishing a book, contact Jess.
Wonderful. Thanks, Bruce. Terrific.
My pleasure.
Okay, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that. And I'll say a collective congratulations to Bruce Lowery on the publication of Catch the Wind. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for that's hooked in today. Oh, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.